So my last story, and this comes to us from Austin, Texas, is Matthew McConaughey thinking about running for governor of Texas. And I'll tell you, ever since Matthew McConaughey was in, I was going to say Fast Times at Ridgemont Highs, Dazed and Confused, I always thought like, oh, that's kind of an actor that I bet you would be fun to grab a beer with. You know, when you see like certain actors or you see their interviews, you're like, I bet that guy's kind of a pompous jerk. I've always had this feeling, and I have no evidence to this, nor do I have any evidence to the contrary. I've always felt like Matthew McConaughey's probably a pretty cool dude who you want to grab a beer with. And then I've seen some of his interviews recently. Not surprising if he had this thought process of like becoming a politician or running for governor. I've seen him on a whole lot of podcasts, like the Jordan Peterson podcast. He's just been making the rounds. Ryan Holiday, the guy that's written a bunch of books on stoicism. Ryan Holiday is an amazing author, by the way. If you haven't read any of his books, please do. So I've seen him making the rounds on all these podcasts and talking a little bit more about his political opinions and philosophy, a little bit more about his religious faith, things that he's learned in life. He published a book about a year ago called Green Lights that I read, and it was kind of interesting because it was quasi-autobiographical, but it was really him taking out all the journals. Apparently he's a big journaler, taking out all the journals since way before he was even famous and kind of going through those and parsing out some of the lessons that he believes in, some of the core values he believes in, some of the lessons that has helped him get to certain places. And his thought is like in his life, he's really used, I'll call them core values, even though he didn't, these lessons in his journals, these core values, these thought processes to just keep getting through green lights, right? And like, he's like, you can look at my career and it's just been kind of one strategically placed point of luck after another, right? He talks about it's like I just hit all the green lights in a row. So it was a really interesting book. I thought it was pretty insightful. It gave you a little bit more about him and kind of, like I said, quasi autobiographical, but talking about it through his decisions and the things that are important to him and the things that he holds dear. And so he's thinking about running for governor. Not surprising. Ted Cruz, senator out of Texas, chimed in and said, yeah, he's a charming movie star. I'm sure he's a good guy, but maybe we should have somebody that knows a little bit more about government running for office in the state of Texas. And I got to tell you, this was always the danger of Republicans getting on board with Trump, because there is a lot more famous people in America who lean left or far left or far, 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 far left than there is people that lean right or are libertarians or self-proclaimed Republicans. Now, I tend to believe, based on a few of the interviews I've seen with Matthew McConaughey, he's probably a little bit more conservative, definitely more religious, and probably a little bit more libertarian than virtually everybody in Hollywood. But Republicans, this is your fault, morons. When you got behind somebody who could win the presidency based on name recognition and based on the fact that he had been on, The Apprentice and people knew his name and stayed in his hotels, the danger was always that you were going to have Kim Kardashian as the next governor of California, or that you were going to have Alec Baldwin running for president, right? And these are probably people that have big name recognition and can get elected, probably don't have the same core values of those of you on the right side of the political spectrum. So again, I have no strong personal opinion about Matthew McConaughey as a future politician. I do think it wouldn't be a horrible idea for a guy who's a self-made millionaire. Let's look up the net worth of Matthew McConaughey. I'm going to guess 34 million. And one of the things that I actually did like about Trump, to give the devil his due, is that he did have so much personal net worth and value. It was very clear that he didn't care who he pissed off. Now, a lot of people could say that's a really bad thing because that created the leader of the free world being allowed to put himself in the situation where he'd go on Twitter and say really rude things and not set the right tone for the country. But it did feel like throughout his entire presidency that he wasn't kind of selling out to special interests, because what does he care? He's already probably a multi-hundred millionaire, if not a billionaire, with his assets. So what was Matthew McConaughey's net worth?
150.
150 million? I was way off. Dude, still banking that money from Dazed and Confused, or has it invested wisely? So I kind of like the idea of somebody who's not, doesn't have to sell out to political interest groups or special interest groups. You know, he can kind of trade off the fact that like he can invest some of his own money as a campaign. He can run off of brand recognition. He'll get a ton of media without having to pay for it. And so, you know, a lot of those special interest groups that come into play when you're early on your political rise, he can probably sidestep a lot of that and then just think about good policy. Now, I would be interested in him, you know, coming out either as a Republican or him, you know, being a little bit more open in Texas about maybe his more progressive views due to the fact that he was kind of born and raised as an adult in this Hollywood, you know, California atmosphere. Again, I don't know anything about his political beliefs other than some of the stuff that he shared in his book and on podcasts, but it'll be interesting to see if he can be authentic with who he would be politically and either alienate the left side of the spectrum in Hollywood if he comes out as like a libertarian or a pretty hard right side conservative, or he would have to alienate and win over the conservative voters in Texas if he comes out and says, no, I'm more of a progressive and I think that's the right vision for Texas. So it should be interesting. But yeah, I mean, if there's somebody to do it from the movie star arena, maybe he's the guy to do it. But, you know, to all my Republican friends, be careful what you wish for, because, yeah, you got 4 years of Trump based on his name recognition. But how are you going to feel if the next president of the United States is Whoopi Goldberg or Alec Baldwin, who could just not be more far to the left, right? That's the scary part about this becoming like a zeitgeist popularity contest. The presidency's always been a popularity contest, but at least we were picking from people that had some governmental experience and some people that had the opportunity to be statesmen and stateswomen. But now we've opened it up to everybody. So be careful what you ask for.